Okay, so you want to build a ship of titanic proportions. Pour the steel, stack the decks, fill it with thousands of passengers, and collect the fares. It sounds like the ultimate floating monopoly. One ship, a captive audience, and nowhere else to eat, sleep, or be entertained for a week. No competition. Nobody builds a second cruise ship next to yours in the middle of the ocean. You are, by definition, the only option. So, you sit back, watch the passengers board, and let the money come in. That is the dream, and it is not entirely wrong. The problem is what happens between the dream and the reality. What it actually costs to get in. What it costs just to keep the steel from rusting in salt water. What happens when the world stops sailing? And why the smartest maritime investors on the planet, people with hundreds of billions of dollars to deploy, still manage to lose spectacular amounts of money on ships that, by every reasonable measure, should have worked. Let's start with the first question. What does it actually take to build one? In 1912, the RMS Titanic cost roughly $7.5 million to build. Adjusted for inflation, that is about $200 million today. But a modern equivalent, a true mega ship designed to dominate the seas, is an entirely different financial animal. Royal Caribbean's Icon of the Seas, launched in 2024, cost approximately $2 billion. You are not buying a boat. You are buying a floating city that weighs 250,000 tons. When investors value a megaship, they compare the build cost against projected EBITDA, the money the business earns before paying interest, taxes, and accounting adjustments. A ship of this scale is expected to generate hundreds of millions in revenue per year, but the purchase price is staggering. The buyers are not paying for what the ship earns in year one. They are paying for a 30 to 40-year monopoly over a mobile resort that can be rerouted to wherever the highest-paying tourists happen to be. That is the core logic. Ultimately, investors are buying a self-contained economy, not just a vessel. If you want to build one, the first thing you need is a shipyard capable of the build. You cannot just go to a local dry dock. There are only a handful of shipyards on the planet: Meyer Werft in Germany, Chantier de l'Atlantique in France, and Fincantieri in Italy, that can even handle a vessel of this scale. The waitlist for a build slot can be half a decade long. Engineering a megaship presents the next hurdle. A megaship is not a cargo freighter. It is a multi-layered skyscraper laid on its side, designed to withstand 40-foot waves while keeping a buffet line perfectly stable. The hull requires tens of thousands of tons of specialized steel. The power plant must generate enough electricity for a city of 10,000 people running 24 hours a day. The HVAC systems, the water desalination plants, the waste management facilities. All of it running simultaneously, continuously, trapped inside a steel tube in the middle of the ocean. Here is the trap that destroys ship projects more reliably than almost anything else. When you borrow money to build a megaship, and you always borrow money, you start paying interest the moment the loan arrives, not when the ship launches, not when the first passenger boards, but the day the money hits your account. Every month of construction delay is a month paying interest on billions of dollars while generating zero revenue. A modern megaship takes roughly 2 to 3 years to build. But shipyards operate on a razor-thin margin of error. If the delivery is delayed by 6 months because the propulsion system fails sea trials or a supply chain bottleneck holds up the engines, the interest compounds. The cruise industry has its own version of the Berlin-Brandenburg airport, and it is called the shipyard financial death spiral. When a ship is ordered, the builder agrees to a fixed delivery date. But these vessels are so complex that integrating the HVAC, the water treatment, and the safety systems into a moving steel frame often reveals catastrophic flaws during sea trials. When the Classification Society or the Coast Guard finds a flaw, the ship stays in dry dock. Every day it sits there, unfinished. It costs the operator hundreds of thousands of dollars in interest and lost bookings. Beyond the hull lies the fit-out. A ship hull is just a steel shell. What turns it into a revenue-generating machine is the interior, and a modern megaship interior is not a series of rooms. It is a floating theme park. Water slides suspending hundreds of tons of water above the top deck, ice skating rinks requiring specialized refrigeration in the tropics, central parks with thousands of real plants growing in the middle of the ocean, casinos, theaters, and multi-story dining rooms. All of this must be fireproofed to exacting maritime standards. If the automated fire suppression system fails an inspection, the ship cannot legally carry a single paying passenger. In 2013, the Norwegian Breakaway experienced engine fires during its inaugural season due to propulsion faults. It did not sink, but the repairs, the itinerary changes, and the reputational damage cost millions. During the construction phase, minor miscalculations become massive financial leaks. A weight miscalculation in the top deck means the ship is top-heavy. You cannot just tear it out. You have to add solid steel ballast to the bottom, which increases fuel consumption for the next 40 years. A plumbing design that requires higher water pressure than the desalination plant can provide means ripping out walls in 100 cabins. None of these are individually catastrophic. Together, they can add hundreds of millions to the final cost and delay delivery by a year. When the ship finally launches, the financial mechanics shift entirely. When the ship finally opens for business, money comes in from two completely different categories. The first is ticket revenue, the base fare passengers pay to get on the ship. A 7-day Caribbean cruise on a megaship might cost anywhere from $1,000 to $3,000 per person. With 7,500 passengers on board, that looks like serious money. But here is the problem. The base fare rarely covers the cost of operating the ship. Fuel, crew wages, food, and insurance consume almost the entire ticket price. In some cases, the ticket price does not even break even. The cruise industry operates on a model where the fare simply gets the passenger on board. The real profit begins once they are inside the monopoly. That business is everything that is not the cabin. Globally, onboard revenue accounts for roughly 25% to 35% of total cruise revenue, but it generates a disproportionate share of the profit. Alcohol packages, specialty restaurants, shore excursions, casino gambling, spa treatments, internet access, and photo packages. A passenger who paid $1,200 for a week might spend another $800 on board. The margin on a margarita poured from a duty-free bottle is extraordinary. The margin on a $150 shore excursion that costs the ship $30 in local vendor fees is equally attractive. Architecture on the ship is designed specifically to maximize the time passengers spend in front of these revenue centers. Cabins on megaships are intentionally small. The goal is not to make the passenger miserable, but to ensure they do not spend time in the room. The public spaces are vast, brightly lit, and constantly active. The central promenades are lined with bars, shops, and restaurants. There is no direct path from the cabin to the theater that does not pass through the casino or the retail zone. Studies in cruise passenger behavior show that passengers who walk through a casino to reach the dining room are significantly more likely to gamble than passengers on ships where the casino is tucked away. The layout is not accidental. It is a revenue extraction machine floating in international waters. One more detail. Cruise lines price alcohol packages at a level where most passengers cannot physically drink enough to break even. The break-even point is roughly 6 to 7 alcoholic beverages per day. The average passenger consumes 4. The package is prepaid before the cruise begins. The cruise line collects the money up front, and the passenger spends the week trying and failing to get their money's worth, creating the illusion of value while the ship pockets the difference. All of this revenue looks good on paper. The reason ship investing is not a guaranteed fortune is what you have to spend to generate it. Start with fuel. A megaship burns roughly 150,000 to 250,000 gallons of fuel per day. When oil prices spike, the margin on every cruise narrows dramatically. The ship cannot simply stop sailing. Crew costs are staggering. A megaship carries between 2,000 and 2,400 crew members, housed and fed on board for 6 to 9 months at a time. Maintenance is relentless. Salt water corrodes everything. When a ship goes into dry dock for scheduled maintenance, it generates zero revenue while the costs of the yard, the labor, and the debt service continue. A standard dry dock costs millions and takes weeks. In early 2020, the worst thing that can happen to a business with enormous fixed costs and variable revenue happened to every cruise ship in the world simultaneously. By March of that year, the entire global cruise industry was effectively shut down. Passengers were trapped on ships without brakes. Ports refused to let them dock. The images of megaships floating offshore with thousands of passengers unable to disembark became a global symbol of the pandemic. For ship operators, this was catastrophic in a very specific way. The ship did not close. The engines did not stop. Bond payments still came due every month. Insurance premiums remained. Crew had to be repatriated from ships that no country wanted in its waters. Ships went from generating millions per week to generating nothing while costs stayed largely intact. Some operators managed to secure relief funding. Others were forced to sell ships for scrap. The industry lost over $60 billion in revenue in 2020 alone. Not all ships face this problem because not all ships are megaships. A small luxury vessel carrying 200 passengers operates on an entirely different economic logic. It charges exorbitant fares and survives on ticket margin, not onboard volume. But what happens when a mid-sized operator tries to compete with the megaships without the scale to support it? The answer is almost always the same: bankruptcy and the scrapyard. There is a category of maritime mistake that is more expensive, more final, and more embarrassing than almost any other: the ghost ship. Vessels that were built, launched, and simply did not fill with passengers. The demand projections were wrong, not slightly, catastrophically. In the 2000s, operators believed the market wanted endless luxury mega yachts. They ordered vessels at hundreds of millions of dollars each. When the financial crisis hit, financing collapsed. Ships were seized by creditors, sat empty in dry docks for years, and were eventually sold for pennies on the dollar. The original buyers lost everything. They built on ambition rather than market data. Nobody asked the passengers if they would actually pay the premiums required to keep the lights on. Now, let's look at what happens when a ship does everything right. Royal Caribbean's Icon-class ships are the apex predators of this industry. In 2023, the company reported record revenues of $13.9 billion, with operating profit margins on these vessels routinely exceeding 20%. In most capital-intensive industries, that is an extraordinary return. A vessel at 20% margin is extracting exceptional value from every person who walks up the gangway. At that scale, a $1 increase in average daily onboard spend across a fleet is worth tens of millions annually. The small ship needs passengers. The megaship is a destination families cannot afford to ignore. The ship of the coming decades will not look fundamentally different, but the economics will shift. The most significant structural change is fuel. Megaships are moving to LNG and hydrogen fuel cells to protect against the brutal volatility of marine diesel. Mirroring the Aerotropolis model, cruise lines are buying entire islands, developing them into exclusive resorts, and routing their own ships there. The passenger gets off the ship, but they never leave the monopoly. They are still swiping the same wristband, buying the same drinks at a higher margin because there are no local competitors. Here is the honest answer. It depends entirely on scale. A mid-sized ship in a crowded market is a financial death trap. A megaship above 5,000 passengers is a different category entirely. It faces heavy regulatory scrutiny and massive capital obligations. It spends billions rebuilding engines and fighting health inspections. But at its volumes, even with those burdens, it generates more cash than almost any comparable asset. The fixed costs are what keep ship investors awake at night. Not the weather, not the competition, not even the passengers. The steel, the fuel, and the debt are there on the day the first passenger boards, and on the day no passengers board at all. And the gap between those 2 days is where fortunes are made and lost. So, if you do decide to build a ship of titanic proportions, understand what you are actually buying. You are not buying a boat. You are buying a piece of sovereign infrastructure that forces every passenger to sleep in your beds, eat in your dining rooms, and gamble in your casino, entirely isolated from the free market. In the right market, at the right scale, with the right management, that is one of the most durable positions in global business. The question is whether you can survive long enough to reach it.